everybody. We were taking an extra minute here to get set up so that our speakers that we have in the room with us tonight can make public comments on camera. So I appreciate your patience as I call to order the Tuesday, July 7th, 2020 meeting of the Monmouth City Council. And I'm going to have Phyllis do the roll call, please. She's speaking and she looks like she's unmuted. Not sure why we can't hear her.
Councillor Belts.
Here.
Councillor Carey.
Here.
Councillor Lopez.
Here.
Councillor Sharmer.
Here.
Councillor Schinkel.
Here.
Councillor Silbernagel.
Here.
Mayor Kuntz.
Here. And if we can all mute ourselves for the flag salute, I think it's better if we have one person leading us. I'm going to ask Councillor Schinkel if you can do that. The rest of us can mute so we don't have all the delays. That would be great. Mm-hmm. Please rise.
Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So this evening, we just want to mention we do have some folks that are interested in making public comment. If anyone has called in this evening and is interested in making public comment, if you could please, if you're online and can get into the chat and notify, just message Phyllis Bowman and let her know your name and what you'd like to speak on. She will let me know so that we will be able to call upon you for public comments. If you're on the phone only, then when I do mention about public comments, if you want to unmute yourself, but the best way would be to go into chat and ask Phyllis Bowman to assist you, and that will be great when we get there. But we're going to start off this evening as we usually do with our consent calendar. Tonight we have the minutes of the council meeting of June 16th and then a work session of the same night. And unless there are any corrections on those, I would appreciate a motion to approve them.
I move approval of both.
Thank you, Councillor Silbernagel. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Councillor Schinkel. And all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 And any opposed? All right, thank you very much. The mayor's report this evening. I want to let you know that tomorrow night will be the first of two scheduled meetings for the Mayor's Roundtable that Mayor John McArdle and I are holding. We have invited a dozen community members to participate in these first two sessions, and we will be meeting at Western Oregon University tomorrow evening to have a facilitated discussion around issues of equity, justice, and opportunity for our community members in Monmouth Independence. So I will be reporting back on that once we have the groups, sort of an opportunity to really get together, build trust, and determine some steps that they would like to take going forward. But that will be tomorrow night. In addition to that, I've been doing some other work with the City of Independence, and I know some of that is in our interim city manager's report. We would continue to build on the relationships we have to support our local businesses together, and doing some other great work there. So that is my news for my report this evening. I also do have in here there's a report on our Economic Development Strategic Ad Hoc Advisory Committee. And we are not at this point appointing members, but I do want to let you know, and actually I'm going to chat if I'll have you or Suzanne sort of report on that as well. But what the information that is in there, I just want to let you know we're not yet appointing members. This is just a task force. And so we will be going through sort of who we are looking at will be assisting us with identifying folks and meeting with them to develop a strategy. So that's kind of where that just for process sake, that's where the process is. Then I will take any reports of other boards and commissions. Does anyone have a report of a board or commission meeting? Councillor Carey.
Well, I would just say that the Planning Commission met on July 1st. I did not attend that meeting. I often report on that. I simply didn't attend in this one because there was a design review, and it was of a nature that conceivably could be appealed to the full council. So, on advice of Suzanne, I elected not to attend. But it did occur, and I wouldn't be surprised if we don't have that coming our way sometime soon. But anyway.
Other boards and commissions. Yes, Councillor Lopez.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The MINET board met, I need to verify the date, 6/25. This was our first virtual board meeting, which was quite interesting. Still getting the kinks out of all of these things. But we do have another board meeting scheduled coming up later this month. The exact date and time I need to verify. In this meeting, it was predominantly catch up, ratification of the budget that was created from the budget committee, and catch up on financials and status of where things have come through COVID thus far. A couple things are burning a little more brightly than others as far as future agenda items. But this particular meeting was mostly review as stated and financials. And that's my report. Thank you.
So I will report that, just take a breath. The WIMPEG board met on June 24th of 2020. It was momentous because that organization, an intergovernmental agency between Western Independence and Monmouth, has not had a fully functioning board for a couple of years now, as it was making a transition potentially to a 501c3. We met. We have another meeting scheduled for August. We will be actually reviewing both the operating budget, which is housed at the City of Monmouth, just because we are the fiscal agent for the organization, but also the capital equipment budget. WIMPEG capital needs are funded by PEG fees, PEG Public Education Government channels, And those PEG fees are collected by MyNet from their customers, and those are passed through to be used for capital needs. So we hope to make some great investments in new equipment and really start talking about how to get the word out to our community that there is a public access channel and there is equipment that actually community members can check out to create content that would be streamed on MyNet's Easy Video, but also available on the YouTube channel. So hopefully we can get some things going and generate some interest in that, and add another tool to our communication tool belt. But that was a big deal. So no other boards and commissions. Then Mr. Olson. He's writing his report or something as we speak.
I'm working on it as we speak. No.
And just so y'all know, Chad actually got his post-COVID haircut finally. So Chris did. We see his curls are gone, and Chad's.
I did. Madam Mayor and members of the City Council, first, congratulations to Councilor Lopez. Well done. And you're here.
Thank you.
So just a couple things for the council real quick. And the reason I was typing in, I see that the city attorney is not in yet.
Right.
So I was emailing to Phyllis to see if she could run him down.
Yeah.
So as far as the first update, as far as the COVID-19 goes, so yes, of course, I'm sure you've seen in the newspapers that the state is experiencing a surge in infections, over 300. And yesterday we were down to 168. I'm not sure what the count is today, but of course that's not good news for the city or any section of the state. Looks like somebody's texting me, probably.
Probably Lane.
Yeah.
That's what I don't.
So, and you'll recall last week, the governor issued a new order that masks or face coverings are to be worn in all public indoor settings. So in combination with that, the city, but we've been doing this for a couple weeks, if we have a customer inside any of the city facilities, they're required to wear a mask while they're inside. Generally, I'm talking about customers within the reception areas, as well as staff that are moving between common areas. That's how we refer to them. And unfortunately, we did have a city employee was infected. That was the first time for the city, but the good news on that is they were working from home remotely, so they were isolated and didn't have any contact with any city staff. So we were doing exactly what we're supposed to do, and that is minimized. Other than that, the hours for the city are the same as they were during the last meeting. City Hall is open on a limited basis, 3 hours a day, if I remember right. We are making an exception during shut-off days. So those 2 days we're staying open the entire 8 hours during the day, so that city staff and customers have additional time to meet and work on details of their accounts. The library is still closed, probably will remain closed for at least a couple more weeks. And the senior center, of course, is still closed. Public Works is moving into their building, but they plan to stay closed to the public for at least a few weeks as well. And the only city buildings that are open during full business hours includes the police department and power and light. So of course they require masks, but they are open to the public during the entire time. So the one thing is that yes, Monmouth and Independence are working well. We did finally get the receipt of the Oregon business dollars for the loan program that we're working on. So the city, the check was issued, $22,500 was issued to the city last week. So we have that. We have had one applicant who's turned in. And of course, if you remember, the Council of Governments is processing those applications. Unfortunately, with one of the conditions is if a business has accepted federal dollars, the PPP through the PPP program, they're not eligible for this program. I'm hopeful that at least in later renditions of the program that they may remove that requirement or allow businesses to repay their money back so they can be eligible for other programs. But at this point, I'm not sure how that will work out at the end of the day, but it is creating some problems for businesses being able to take advantage of the program that we have. And so, of course, with the 4th of July over the weekend, and because of the COVID, there's been a lot of changes in how that has worked. And the only two things that happened was there was a decorating contest. I think there was a pretty good turnout for home decorations, and I believe the mayor was one of the judges.
I did not judge. I was able to hand the winners
Oh, there
their
you go.
winning. I was announcing them as winners.
Even
Got to go around
if they never get mad at the person
and the
handing out
money.
the
Hand
check.
the money.
So that turned out pretty well, and there was a small walk between Monmouth and Independence it was a freedom walk, and that was uneventful. I do believe over the weekend the police department, as you would expect, experienced some increased calls with activities, and given the fact that there were no public shows, fireworks shows, or they were very few, there's increase in the number of homes that were attempting to do their own displays. So that's the COVID piece. A few other things. There's a Black Lives Matter listening session tomorrow at 7 o'clock at Independence Park. Chief Talon will be there, as well as perhaps a few of his officers, Lieutenant Hines maybe. And I also plan to attend that. For the July 21st council meeting, the Water Master Plan and the Stormwater Utility are both scheduled to be presented to the council for additional deliberations and discussions. The City Hall project, we have a meeting, virtual meeting with the architects next week for the final review and a review of the cost estimates attached to that. So because the July 21st meeting is so stacked, we'll schedule FFA to come to the council at your first meeting in August. And another thing is the Mid-Willamette Valley Homeless Alliance. So the final IGA, the 190 agreement is prepared. You'll have that at your next meeting. And finally, the Ash Creek Station opening at Ross was last Friday, and that was awesome. And it was good to see a lot of the city's leadership out at the meeting, including both elected and appointed officials. And I hope that the council was able to go over and take a walkthrough of the Public Works remodel project. I think it looks great, and Public Works is very proud of that new space. And that's all I have, unless there's questions. Did you want me to talk a little bit about the economic development?
Yes.
So in your packet, you'll see a staff report on the Economic Development Ad Hoc Committee. And if you see there's the bullets that include an outline of what the committee, the framework of the committee will look like. And the important thing to know is it's an ad hoc committee. It's intended to be short-term, 4 to 6 meetings with no more than 8 to 12 members. And the intent is to put some content to the framework of the economic development strategic plan that we presented to the council at a prior meeting. So Suzanne and I will both be staff, and I think the other important thing is, so the mayor provided an outline of the sectors that we hope to recruit to participate with this. So in order to do this in a timely fashion, I think there will be recruitment out to folks by the mayor, and Councilor Carey and Belts will reach out to folks to participate. And as they come on, we'll probably go ahead and have meetings in between, say, if this goes quickly. In theory, there could be a meeting between today and the 21st where they get together and say have an organizational meeting to kind of review the purpose statement of what the intent is and things like that. And then at the 21st meeting, any members would be provided to the council by the mayor for appointments. So there may be, and I've seen this happen in the past, it's not uncommon to have new members come on to a meeting after a meeting or two, and then come up to the council to ensure that they're officially appointed to that. But I think we do want to try to get the strategic plan developed and back to the council for approval, so that we can continue to move on this quickly. So the intent by staff certainly is to be not to leave this go, but to continue to move on it in a quick fashion. Same as with the urban renewal capital plan that we're presenting tonight. So we want to present these to the council, get feedback, make whatever modifications or adjustments that we have to do, and then to continue on. So at least for me, I'm trying to make sure that we keep things expedited and moving forward. And
Yes.
that's all I have,
Thank you.
unless there's questions.
Well, we had a motion in that.
Well, there is a motion.
Item. So I think it's probably a good idea to go ahead
And so the motion, just to explain that, so in order for the group to officially have meetings and recognize that there will be appointments coming back later, this would provide authorization to the mayor and two council members to next meeting with appointments, or I guess appointments could even go into August as well.
So any questions about that process? Because again, it's kind of open-ended, not typically how we get members onto a commission or committee, but it allows that flexibility to get going and developing our plan, as long as we are really reaching out to a diverse part of the community, which is our goal. So questions or concerns? Otherwise, I would like the motion. I would like sort of a formal direction to city staff and the representatives to be able to go forward and select folks. Councilor Carey.
Oh, there we go. I was not sure I could get to it with this one screen. I move to direct city staff to appoint council representatives, to select additional representatives to serve in the Monmouth Economic Development Strategic Planning Committee, and to initiate the strategic planning process.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Well, Councilor Lopez and Councilor Shingletide, so we'll give that
Councilor
to
Schinkel can have it.
he can have that. So thank you. Any other discussion? All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 And any opposed? All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate that flexibility, and we've got some great names we're already generating. Suzanne and I have had a good brainstorming session. I think we'll get some folks who will really be able to assist us in getting this put in place. And move forward, particularly with the hiring of an economic development director as per our budget this year. So thank you. Thanks for putting that together. And thanks, Suzanne, for finding some time somehow in your schedule to work on this.
Thank you.
All right.
If I may, I have a COVID comment for Chad and the mayor, if I may.
Certainly.
I
Counselor Sharma.
went out to the grocery store, to our new Ross, by the way, which is wonderful, and was surprised to see a lot of people wearing masks, but the masks were just covering their mouth. Some people had the mask under their chin. And so the governor today tweeted about the importance of wearing masks, and I commented back to her that she might ask establishments that have a sign that says you should wear a mask to add a line to the sign that says the mask should cover your mouth and your nose. I don't know how much effect I have as one little person here, but maybe the city of Monmouth would have have more pull with her if we were to say that people need to wear their masks properly to protect everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Counselor Sharma. And I know that is a concern. We are getting comments. Again, the governor made it clear that this compliance should be handled by OSHA, specifically around the state, and that would be a place concerns and complaints should go. We still are trying to do a lot of education. Both the Monmouth Business Association, the Chamber, the Independence Downtown Association are working on that, either by making sure that businesses have the signs, know the availability of signage, and then also we are talking about doing another small campaign of education and reminders to the community, because it's extremely important. If this is what will determine whether or not we can stop the spread, we can continue to keep our businesses open. And believe me, after a 3.5-hour school board meeting last night, we know the concerns about getting kids back to school this fall, and this helps. It is a proven way to get us back on track, and not much to ask. So thank you for that. And I know we are working on it. I know we're trying to find ways to get community members to help out with this, and get businesses to be able to enforce the rules that they need to enforce while getting cooperation from customers. So, thank you. Also, just another quick thing on that. Western Oregon University has been working with Polk County. They now have 2 community health professors, one of whom is an epidemiologist, one who is a statistician, and they have trained a cohort of coordinators, recently graduated students, as well as some student interns who will be doing communication and contact tracing work with Polk County. So we are getting some force multiplier going here in our community to start helping more with these efforts. And part of that is education and communication about how we can better stop the spread. So you may see more on that as well. John Kerry.
A question for Chad, too, actually. You mentioned that the library and the senior center continue to be closed, but hopefully could be opened in the next couple weeks. What are the metrics that you're going to use to decide to open the library and then as well the senior center? What's going to drive that decision?
So primarily, thanks for the question, Councillor Kerry. Primarily, for the library will be driven by the state librarian's office as far as the whatever protocols that they have and the city's librarian, Chris, she's working with them and monitoring that. But by and large, it will probably be based upon capacity. So, 50% of capacity with proper distancing and masks. But she's been, and I think this is true with a lot of libraries, working with through the state librarian's office for the protocols for that. For the senior center, to be quite honest with you, I'm less certain about that because of the high-risk population that they have. I know that the director has, again, is monitoring what protocols are being used and what guidelines are being set out, as well as what other senior centers are doing in terms of best practices. But that one I'm less sure of. And admittedly, I'm pretty conservative about the opening or reopening of city offices to the public. So I have personally no issues with slow opening. I know it's inconvenient for the public, but at the same time, as I've told the council many times, the health of our staff as well as the health of the public are just paramount with me in lieu of just opening just out of convenience sake. So, but that's a great question, and I will talk to both of them and circle back and send out a note to the entire council answering that in more detail.
I think that information would be comforting to those that are both nervous about the opening and anxious about an opening as well. To have to be clear on that. The last thing for me, and you mentioned in your report that for the next meeting there may be a couple of things like the water master plan and the perhaps a homeless initiative. I would just request if those are fairly in-depth and sizable documents. Well, if we get those in hard copy a little in advance, be great. It's much easier to read those if you can get your hand on them and in and out.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what form they'll take, but if they are voluminous and complicated, I think the more chance we have to dive into them, the better we'll understand.
And I agree with that, absolutely. The two things that will be work session related, not action items, include the water master plan. So we've been talking about that for the last couple months for getting the final report to the council. And the consultants from the FCS, yeah, the FCS group, they're going to present to the council it's a status report on the stormwater utility discussion, pick up where we left off with the last, it was a open house meeting over at the pizza parlor. So they'll come back, talk about that, and kind of.
This conference will now be recorded.
And pick that up. I hope everyone heard that.
I think they did.
So they'll come back and pick that up where we left off, and then talk to the council. We briefed them on the discussions that we had during the budget committee meetings. So hopefully they'll come in and be prepared to answer those questions and hear the concerns from the council. And the 190 agreement through the for the Homeless Alliance, that hopefully will be a fairly short document, and it'll be pretty easy to go. But I do agree specifically with the stormwater utility and the water master plan.
Okay. Thank you. No other questions about that, then we will move to our citizen comments, and I'll start with the folks here in the room before checking to see if we have anybody online who would like to speak to us tonight. Actually, our first comment, Carol McKeel. Is she?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, City Council members. The murder of George Floyd, as well as the recent back-to-back police killings of Black people, have caused a group of Monmouth citizens to come together and question our own police department. We question how a Monmouth officer's subconscious bias may impact interactions with people of color. Today, many Americans have come to recognize that an inherent racial bias is so integrated into our lives that we don't think about it nor recognize all the different ways we're influenced by it. We watch reports, movies, TV shows that are all steeped in racism that subconsciously normalize a false story of a white-centered culture. We live in predominantly white neighborhoods, attend predominantly white churches, and work in predominantly white institutions. Our Monmouth residents of color have a very different life experiences compared to our white residents. Since George Floyd's murder, we are starting to hear from people of color in Monmouth who are sharing that they don't feel safe in our community, partly because of their encounters with police. They talk about feeling afraid when stopped by white officers. Some have said the only time they are stopped by police is in Monmouth. We acknowledge that the police department has the admirable goal to be a positive agency in our community, but there seems to be a disconnect of perceptions between the Monmouth Police Department and the community they serve. To begin the process of creating a safe community for every person in Monmouth, we have 3 requests. First, we ask that the City of Monmouth conduct a survey of Monmouth residents, particularly residents of color, about their experience with and trust of the police department. The city could use a survey similar to the one used by Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles. The data will help the city leaders assess the experience and perception of people of color in our community. Second, we ask that the city form an ombudsman group made of people of color who can facilitate a way for individuals to safely register complaints and help identify ways to improve the safety of our city. The city's website could have a link to the community ombudsman so it's easy to access. Third, we ask that the police officers participate in regular, more comprehensive implicit bias training offered by a person of color. The equity training that the officers receive once a year is not enough since it cannot begin to offset the ubiquitous daily negative messages of a racialized society. The community ombudsman should be involved in identifying an appropriate training package. Also, we ask that this training include the topic of positionality of being white in a racialized society, white fragility, and the history of racism in the United States and Oregon, as well as its history in police departments. The Independence Police Department is already starting to plan implicit bias training with their officers. Due to the collaborative work between the 2 departments, it would be wise to join them. More rigorous training in implicit bias will improve how well police officers will be able to hear and understand the perspective of our citizens of color. We believe that improved understanding and appreciation of the diversified experiences, perspectives of the citizens within our community will contribute to a safer Monmouth and more effective and contented police department. These requests won't solve everything. This is just the beginning of developing the kind of community where everyone, regardless of identity, feels welcome and safe. At the next City Council meeting, we look forward to hearing the Council's concrete plans to implement these ideas. Within 3 months, we ask that the Council provide a public report on the progress of their implementation. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, I didn't ask Carol to state her name and city residence for the record, but we do have that here. So
Carol McKeel, Monmouth. Sorry.
that's okay, my fault. Thank you, Carol. I have Mara and Bella Oliveros. If you'd like to come up to the microphone and introduce yourselves and the city where you live. Make sure we can hear both of you. Thanks.
Can we take off our masks?
You
Okay.
can.
I am Arvos.
I'm gonna have you speak up just a little bit so they can hear you in the microphone, so we get that on the record. Thanks.
I am Mara Oliveros. I am in Monmouth. I'm Bella Oliveros, and I live in Monmouth. Getting me at Western Oregon University.
And I'm going to ask just a second. Can everyone hear these young women?
Kristen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Kristen?
Thank you.
Speaking a little louder and a little more slowly would certainly help this old lady.
Or if you want to move the microphone towards yourselves a
Yeah,
little
pull it
bit, so you don't
closer.
have to lean forward quite so much. Maybe that'll help.
Is that better?
Just speak into it.
Okay.
Thanks.
We want to share with you our experiences participating in the regular protests on 99 and Main and at Western Oregon University, and what we want to see from our leaders. The recent murder of George Floyd and the increase of racial hate has affected us in many ways. We are angry, sad, hurt, and tired. During the protests, we have been yelled at, told to get a fucking life, threatened to be run over, and flipped off many times. We notice the police officers that take the time to acknowledge us with a wave or even a fist in the air. We also notice that the Polk County officials who do not. We notice who honks or gives us some sign of acknowledgement. What peers from school drive by yelling against or in support. We have also noticed the lack of leaders present at this and other events. We are tired of the all lives matter shouts we get. Don't you know that this wouldn't be happening if all lives really did matter? Don't you know that Black lives are part of all lives, yet we haven't heard our leaders publicly and loudly say that Black lives matter? Think of it this way. It's like going to the doctor with a broken ankle and the doctor tells you not to worry about it. All bones matter. It will heal. Will we just ignore the broken piece until it goes away because all bones matter? Is that what we do? We ignore the broken pieces of our society and forget about it and go on with our lives. Maybe this is what white people can do because you will always be protected and have your privilege to protect you against fear of racial violence. We continue to stand and protest so you won't forget. We will not go back to the way life has been, and we will remind you that young people are paying attention. We want meaningful change. We don't care about your fancy plans or what you're doing behind the scenes. All we know is that you're not public about your support of the Black Lives Matter movement. All we know is that our teachers, administrators, police officers, council members, and mayors are not connecting with the youth that will have to carry on this movement. All we know is that our leaders is not being loud enough or doing enough. We don't want to hear your excuses. We don't want to hear that this is political. We don't want to hear that you can't or it will take too much time to make changes in our police department, schools, and community. We are tired of being lied to in schools and learning from a whitewashed curriculum. We are tired of being lied to that our community cares but no action is really taken. We are simply tired of our older generation not caring about our future. We want all of our police officers, council members, teachers, school board members, and anyone who works for our city be required to complete intensive anti-racist training several times a year, every year, as part of our employment contract. We want more activities and resources available to students and our community, including history about Oregon's racist roots and active anti-racist learning. We want swift action against any racist act, language, or harassment to be taken seriously and even result in losing one's job if it is a serious offense. We are asking for everyone to learn, grow, and act like decent human beings. Anyone visiting or living in our communities should know that our communities are special and won't tolerate racism. We will continue to stand, not for ourselves, but for the little boys and girls from all races who deserve to be valued and safe. We stand for our little sister who has darker skin than we do and has already experienced racial hate. We stand for the poor and economically insecure who are waiting for fairness. We stand for the LGBTQ+ community and anyone who has struggled to fit into our society. We stand for our seniors and elderly who have waited so long to see change. We stand for our white and non-white brothers and sisters who have the courage to stand with the Black Lives Matter movement. We especially stand for our Black brothers and sisters who have waited over 400 years for racial justice. It is our hope that we can see change for racial justice in our lifetime. It is our hope that the City of Monmouth and Independence can work together to create a community committed to racial justice and equality for all citizens. Don't let us down. Do what you know is right and never stop making our communities better for everyone.
Thank you, ladies, very much. Have you thought about going to the school board? They just had their monthly meeting last night. Yeah, so they would have a meeting again the first Monday in August if you want to do the public comment session there as well. Thank you. And Rebecca Salinas Oliveros. Your name and city of residence, please.
Can you ask her to sit in the middle?
In the middle? Sure. Let me
Well,
scoot one over.
I
For the camera.
I noticed that, they weren't able
Does this
to
work?
see yet.
It's
little bit
the camera in
more-
front of the computer.
Yeah, you
Oh.
should see yourself in the computer.
You can just.
Oh, I see.
That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get.
I
there.
get it. Okay.
Just,
Okay.
turn it towards her a little bit.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, there you
Okay, thank you. Good evening. The recent Black Lives Matter protests appear to have given a voice to Monmouth residents of color, and they are speaking out about their negative interactions with our police officers. During the last city council meeting, we learned from the police chief that several years ago, the police department started collecting racial demographic data of the officers' stops. We would like to express our gratitude and commend the chief for his forward thinking. A group of concerned citizens are disappointed, however, to learn that this data is not being used to monitor Stop Oregon's website. The police have the institutional power to question someone's status and worth. Our Monmouth residents of color suffer when they are afraid they will be arbitrarily stopped in Monmouth, and when they stopped unjustly, they can experience a deep sense of loss and a lack of faith in the community. Monmouth as a whole suffers when any of our citizens suffer. Traffic stops initiated because of the racial bias hurt all of Monmouth. Our community isn't strong when our residents feel afraid and unwelcome. Therefore, it's critically important that we have evidence that all people are treated equitably. We need to know that Monmouth residents of color can move about the city without fear. The racial demographic data collected by the police department will do much to in order to ensure that all people in Monmouth are treated equitably. We have 3 requests for the police department. First, we ask that the police chief review the stop data collected over the past year to identify any racial patterns of police stops. In addition, we ask that every month the chief review current data and, if any racial stop patterns appear, he discusses that data with officers during their department meetings. Second, we ask that the racial demographic data be disaggregated by individual officers in order to identify a pattern of bias by any particular officers and as a way to prevent potential problems with people of color. This data should not be made public, but can serve as a discussion point between the police chief or an appropriate supervisor and the officer in question. Third, we ask that the chief present the aggregated stop data to the mayor and city council in 3 months. We ask that the mayor and city council cross-reference the racial demographic stop data with data collected in a community survey that assesses the public's trust of the police department. We ask that a report with this combined information be presented within 6 months to the public during a city council meeting and made available on the city website via direct link so the public has easy access to the information. Insurance that the police are treating all people equitably will make all Monmouth residents rest easy that we have a safe and welcoming community for everyone. It is a first step to creating equity. At the City Council's next meeting, we look forward to hearing their concrete plans to implement these ideas. Within 3 months, we ask that the Council provides a public report on the progress of the implementation of these 3 points. Thank you for your time. Did you need me to state my name? And yes, Rebecca Salinas Oliveros, Monmouth resident.
Thank you. Did you have a comment? Thanks, Ray. And so Phyllis, that's everyone in the room. Do we have any comments from folks online?
No one has told me they would like to speak.
Okay. Go ahead. No. All right. I'm not seeing.
Sorry to interrupt. I did send a chat to Phyllis, and Phyllis, you just replied with a hello. So I'm sorry that didn't get through. May I make time to speak with the council?
Certainly. State your name, the city, and we'll have your 3 minutes.
Thank you. Nan Willis, Monmouth. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I wanted to talk to you about the 2021 budget. I'd like to forward some observations and ideas, knowing that staff has listened and considered a number of positive changes over the last 3 years since I have been the budget chair. The most important of these is the option for citizen input at all meetings. This should continue to be included on each agenda because it is the only authentic time when citizens can provide input. The June meeting to adopt the budget is too late. The second important improvement was reflected this year in the agenda, where time for discussion of motions was highlighted before making the move to motions. This gave time for much needed sharing of perspectives and possibilities before simply jumping to motions. More possibilities were discussed this year, and this weighing of alternatives is exactly what the Budget Committee should be empowered to do. Third, the budget document has improved with Janet's leadership over the last 3 years. It's clearer, and there is more information included. Along with the foregoing, I also have improvement ideas. I missed the additional info this year regarding Monmouth's debt. It was 1 page this year versus 6 pages last year. In next cycle, the debt picture must show that building a city hall is doable, and this will require more rather than less information about the city's debt. The number of interfund transfers were up by over 1 million this year. All were justified with the exception of the weight of the capital improvement projects. Almost 55% of the CIP funding comes from the general fund. So many projects do get done each year, while it's consistently noted that others don't and get carried over to the next year. It's not really a money issue, but rather a lack of capacity to do so many things at once, like serving up a big piece of cake that you find you can't eat. The minutes stated that the city staff will balance the budget in future years, which may include capital projects. My question, why not now? What do you need to be realistic in your desire for more revenue and your ability to appropriate it and spend it? Speaking of the CIP, the approval of the budget makes the separate approval of the CIP after the approval of the budget a moot point. City staff could organize the process to review and vote on the CIP first after departments have made their presentations, and then move on to the full approval of the full budget. One very disconcerting aha this year is the use of loans between funds. Combined with the interfund transfer, I can only say it feels like a shell game no matter how much it's rationalized. Do we really want to use tax dollars to pay interest on more debt created by these internal loans? If a loan is needed to stabilize the department, why is the department unstable in the first place? The borrowing seems to become a rationale in and of itself to increase rates. Quote, the water fund has borrowed from the sewer fund this year and did not do a rate increase last year, end quote. So if it had to borrow this year, should the rate increase? Should it have increased last year? Should that have been recommended? I would recommend at the least a review of the city policy that allows this practice. You may have noted the June 10th Itemizer Observer article to describe how Dallas revisited this fiscal policy to discourage the practice, encourage saving money. Finally, there were committee members who expressed concern about the proposed budget given the economic recession associated with COVID and the stay-at-home order. City staff acknowledged and said that there would be adjustments with the mid-year financials. I would suggest that the Oregon Department of Administrative Services took a more cautionary note in their revenue summary. 3 brief excerpts from that report, quote, given the depth and breadth of the current economic downturn, no state revenue system will be spared from pain going forward, end quote. Quote, Oregon will share some of the pain felt by sales tax since our revenue system has become much more dependent on consumer and business spending over time, end quote. Lastly, quote, while some taxes will fare better than others, all major revenue sources will face considerable downward pressure given the severity of the recession. The sudden stop in economic activity has led to the largest downward revision to the quarterly forecast that our office has ever had to make. I certainly hope those dire cautions don't come to pass, but I would have appreciated a more considered, softer approach as we go into the next year. I will provide a copy of my statement, the Itemizer Observer article, and the revenue summary to the city clerk so that these may be added to the minutes. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Nan. And any others, Phyllis? Has anyone else indicated interest?
No, not that I can see.
Okay. Again, I don't see anyone else unmuting.
I just unmuted. Can I just say one quick thing here before, I know this should be under council comments, but I'm afraid some of our speakers might leave. And I'd just like to remind everybody that there will be 3 council seats open for election this coming November. And the mayor's position is open as well. Phyllis Bowman has the packets. If you want to check with her, it's a quick and easy process. You just gather 28 signatures from people who will agree that you do live in Monmouth and that you've been registered to vote here for at least a year. So go for it.
So actually the signatures, they don't have to attest to that. They have to be registered voters in Monmouth. And Phyllis will make sure that you have been a resident registered voter in Monmouth before you can run. But yep, the mayor position is a 2-year position, and we rotate the council openings. And this year, as Councilor Sharma said, 3 of those positions will be open. And Phyllis, what's the deadline for those of us who are running again in our positions, as well as anyone newly interested in the position, to return those to you?
So the deadline to return them to me after they have picked up petitions, I've approved their petitions before they circulate them, is August 18th. It has to be back to me by then.
Right.
So regardless of what the signatures attest to, please, for any of you, come by my house and I'll be the first to sign.
Thanks. All right, and Councilor Beltz.
I just wanted to note that I have a counselor comment as well, but there's not a section on the agenda for counselor comments. So if you could just make sure you ask for that before we adjourn, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
I to do that now because really all we have left is our business agenda and our executive session this evening before we move to the Urban Renewal Agency. So if you want to make your counselor comments now, that'd be great.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And if I'm not looking at the camera, I apologize. I'm reading something I've written earlier. So as we struggle with the continued impact of COVID-19 pandemic, which has uprooted many aspects of our personal and professional lives, we've also come face to face with another very real epidemic, racial inequity. The killing of George Floyd and many other Black and brown people at the hands of police have rocked our nation, our state, and our community, and have reawakened the need for change. I spent much of the last 6 weeks listening to the voices of our community, even when it was really uncomfortable. And I've questioned my own way of thinking, and I've had to check my own deeply rooted beliefs about race and racism. I used to be one of those people that when I heard Black Lives Matter, I thought, well, all lives matter, until I learned how offensive that really is. Of course, all lives matter, but people seem to forget sometimes that Black and brown lives are part of that all. If all lives truly mattered to everyone, then there would be no need to say Black Lives Matter. So until now, I've kept most of this to myself, assuming that everybody knew how I felt, but I realize that's not the case. I believe it is time to speak out, to act, and to be visible in my actions. As a community leader, I believe I have a responsibility to acknowledge and show my public support for the Black Lives Matter movement. That includes speaking out publicly like this, even though I'm afraid of saying the wrong thing in my attempt to do the right thing. But silence is complicity. By not saying anything, it appears that I agree with what is happening or what has been happening. I'm sure I will say and do some wrong things, and I ask for forgiveness in advance, but I can't remain silent. A lot of people come to racial justice conversations with good intentions, but they lack an understanding of how they can deepen their investment. I acknowledge that we all can't act or be visible in the same way, but I encourage everybody to think about what you can do. Get up to speed by following publications that cover the Black Lives Matter and other racial justice movements. Things like Color Lines, The Root online, and Black Voices from the Huffington Post. Share or like posts by people of color, and from there, maybe you'll even feel comfortable sharing your own thoughts. If you have money, donate to an organization that helps people of color. Join a vigil or a protest. Write a letter to the editor of the IO or to the Statesman or your local paper. Do something, do anything. Just stop being silent. So we're all busy. This all takes time. We're all volunteers at this. We're all working. But taking time to do this is actually recognizing how I spend my time is part of the privilege that I have, and it's important to spend my time doing this. So these positive and public actions can demonstrate your feelings against hate and show where you stand against racism. I hope by taking these actions myself, it shows my desire to listen and to learn how to address the injustices of our system and institutions, and how I can increase our efforts at building equitable communities where everyone will feel safe and everyone is treated humanely regardless of their race. Lastly, I want to remind the community that we do have an upcoming election locally and nationally, and something that almost everyone has besides a voice is a vote. So use that vote this November. Thank you.
Any other council comments then? Councilor Lopez.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, members of the council, staff, and guests both in the room and virtually. Thank you very much for being here and for having open ears and open hearts to the matters that plague our society today. I think there are a lot of wonderful intentions, but I would like to remind all of us that we sit in those that sit on the dais sit in places of power here in our city. And that I do not feel it is enough to urge people to vote, to urge people to read publications or to be active in advocacy. We are in those places of power that they have the option to vote in or out. And we need to take responsibility and proactive action in these matters. I do believe that our city is in a better space than many out there, but I also firmly believe that we have a huge amount of opportunity for improvement as well. I have never personally experienced any, knowingly experienced any discrimination here to police officers in our city, or by police officers in our city, but I have experienced that in small communities very much like ours. And these things are difficult to see until you're on the brunt of it. So I would encourage all of us to continue discussing this. I would like to officially request a work session to deal with these items. We have not had many work sessions since the advent of COVID. I think there's some technological hurdles, but they can certainly be surmounted. And this is an issue that is important enough to surmount those. So I would like a work session specifically addressing the questions and requests that were brought up in citizen commentary tonight.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I was unmuted. Thank you very much. And yes, I will be working with Chad and the chief and kind of determining how we want to move forward. Again, our next council meeting will be the 21st. And if we will have an opportunity to meet before then, we will make that a priority to discuss some of the things we've heard tonight, and things, again, I'm sure that our chief and officers will hear tomorrow night at the community listening session, which has been scheduled for Riverview Park in Independence at 7 p.m., which will also actually be the Independence Police, Monmouth Police, and our Polk County Sheriff's Office. So another opportunity to hear comments, to hear stories, and to look at ways we can better deal with the problems that many of our community members face and we do not acknowledge. Any other comments? Then we shall go ahead and we will do our business agenda, and then we will actually adjourn to the Urban Renewal Agency, conduct the business. We have a couple of pieces of business there, and then we will go into the council's executive session at the end. I will read the script at that time, but we will start with our business agenda this evening, which is actually old business, and that is an opportunity to review the new ordinance regarding our comprehensive plan amendment zone change. Okay, Suzanne, our
Yes.
Community Development Director.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Suzanne Deffner, Community Development Director for the City of Monmouth, here to present the staff report tonight for ordinance number 1392. This is an ordinance adopting comprehensive plan amendment and zone change for a property located on the corner of Monmouth Avenue South and Clay Street West. The applicant was Ron Wilson Center that had requested a change from the high density residential zoning district to the Main Street district to help facilitate an office expansion at their current location. As you'll recall, we've had 2 public hearings on this application, one before the Planning Commission, one before the City Council. First reading was conducted at the last council meeting. And so you have before you tonight alternatives and a motion to take action in a second reading, which would formally adopt ordinance 1392 and make this zone change comprehensive plan amendment go into effect 30 days upon passage. So if there's any other questions about that, I'd be happy to answer those.
I don't see any questions. So in our packet, again, the detailed information as well as a suggested motion. And I would entertain one at this point. Councillor Schinkel.
Having discussed this quite a bit and heard some good information, I move to adopt ordinance number 1392, an ordinance amending the Monmouth Comprehensive Plan map designation for a certain parcel of real property located at 155 Clay Street West and 211 Monmouth Avenue South, assessor map number 8525 AD, tax lots 7800 and 7901, from high density residential to commercial, and amending the Monmouth zoning map designation for said parcel from high density residential to Main Street District.
Second.
Thank you, Councillor Schinkel for the motion and Councillor Belts for the second. Is there any discussion? Then Phyllis, roll call, please.
Councillor Belts,
Aye.
Councillor Schinkel,
Yes.
Councillor Silbernagel,
Aye.
Councillor Lopez,
Aye.
Councillor Sharmer,
Yes.
Councillor Carey.
Aye.
Motion passes, I believe. So thank you very much. Ordinance number 1392 on the books. Thank you for all that work. And thank you, Councillor Schinkel, for taking the plunge on a gigantic ordinance name right there. That was good.
Mouthful.
Actually, I will read our executive session script again, but then we will adjourn and reconvene as the Urban Renewal Agency to conduct business. The council, when it reconvenes, will meet in executive session for the purpose of discussing employment of a public officer and consultation with legal counsel. The executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192-662A to consider the employment of a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual agent, and ORS 192-662H to consult with counsel concerning the legal rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed, which allows the council to meet in executive session. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience will be asked to leave the room and the call. No decision may be made in executive session. At the end of executive session, we will return to open session and would welcome any audience back in the room, but it is not anticipated that action will be taken this evening after returning from executive session. So at this point, I will adjourn the regular meeting of the City Council. And I'm going to ask for about I have 7:44, so I'm going to
We have sound.
All right. I'm seeing if folks are back on. If you can flip on your camera so I can confirm that you're back. Counselor Belts, Counselor Lopez. I see you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Counselor Carey. All right. I will hereby call to order the Tuesday, July 7th meeting of the Urban Renewal Agency. And roll call, please, Phyllis.
Mr. Carey, Mr. Lopez,
Here.
Ms. Dr. Sharmer,
Here?
Mr. Schinkel,
Here.
Mr. Silbernagel,
Here.
Ms. Belts,
Here.
Ms. Kuntz.
I am here as well. And this evening, we also have an opportunity for citizen comments. I don't have any here in the room. And Phyllis, did we receive any in advance of tonight's meeting?
No, we did not.
Thank you. Our consent calendar consists of the minutes of our last Urban Renewal Agency meeting of June 2nd. Just meeting all the time now, this organization. We have to. So I would entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar as presented, or changes if noted.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded to accept the consent calendar as submitted. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you very much. We have one order of business, and this is something that's been much needed, long anticipated by me. So thank you to our fabulous staff for preparing this, and I'll turn it over to Chad.
Thank you, and thank you, members of the agency. Let's see, so I will point out that the directors of Power and Light, Public Works, and the finance director are all here who can hopefully, if there's questions as we're going through this, they can answer some of those specifically as it relates to the projects. Second thing I'll mention is that there was a email sent out late today that included a resource page. So the capital project schedule that we provided had the numbers. Now the numbers by and large are tied to known resources, which were as part of Tiberius Solutions analysis that they did. But working on our urban renewal CIP, we put together a single sheet that kind of summarized the financial forecast for the agency. So that being said, the first thing I'll do, so we're going to go through this in a couple different sections. Hopefully it won't take more than half an hour. Feel free to ask questions as it relates to any projects. I'll do a brief overview of Tiberius Solutions financial analysis, and you can have questions. If the questions get too deep between Janet and myself, we may at a future meeting bring Nick in to answer any questions that you have about the forecast. So the first thing is, just so you know, it was in December 2005 that the ordinance was adopted by the council. And when you look at Tiberius's solutions, he uses a fiscal year 2026 as the termination of the Urban Renewal Agency, and specifically the ability to issue debt. So since 2006, there hasn't been a financial update to the plan. I have already asked Janet to tickle that for 2 years from now to do it again. As you get closer to your end date, you're going to want to do it at least, I would say, 2 year, 4 year, 5 year. to ensure that as you get closer to your maximum indebtedness, you are able to make any adjustments that you need to do, and the cost to have Nick Popnick from Tiberius do the updates is really, it's just not very much money to do that. So 15 years, basically the agency went before it did a financial update, and you know, I think I wish you had have done it sooner. But the two takeaways. So the first thing to talk about regarding Tiberius Solutions analysis, there are a couple takeaways from his work, and the big thing is you will probably hit your maximum indebtedness, $12 million, by fiscal year 26. So if you have taken the time to read through his material, and it's not exceptionally dense, but it is a financial report that, you know, you have to look at a lot of numbers and tables and follow the bouncing ball and all that kind of stuff. But if you, on the first page of my staff report, there's a summary of Tiberius's analysis. And so I'll just tell you a few things that you should be aware of with that. One is the two key things on for the agency is your maximum indebtedness. That's $12 million. That's a set in stone number. I don't believe you could change it without at least a major amendment, but you wouldn't want to do it either. The second thing is that something that's not required by law, but the Monmouth agency did adopt, is to include a sunset of 2026. So that's not it's not an urban renewal requirement. It's not required by statute, but it's a discretionary decision that you can make. And back in 2005, for whatever reason, the council, when they were adopting the ordinance, that's what they did. They set a sunset for 26. So regardless of how you're doing and what projects you have completed, you are unable to issue debt past 2026. So those are the two big things. You can continue to, if you issue debt prior to that, which we'll talk about according to Tiberius's forecast, if you issue debt, say in the last year, 2026, and in his plan, there's an assumption built into that you'll issue debt, the agency will issue debt of approximately $4.5 million in the final year. So you can issue the debt and you can continue to spend money on projects after 2026. You just can't issue new debt or take out additional loans. But you don't have to issue that debt in the final year. And if you follow the schedule that the capital improvement plan has put forth, you will probably have to issue debt. Well, what I'm anticipating is at least twice, once this year and at least once in 2024. It should show up on the resource schedule when we put that up on the screen. Second thing is when Tiberius was looking at the financial forecast, he included 3 scenarios. So if you looked at the report, you'll see scenario A, B, and C. And that was to develop what the forecasted income would look like for the agency. And the scenario A is the scenario that was used, that he used in his forecast. So B and C, both, the big difference between those is A includes $50 million worth of anticipated assessed value that will come onto the tax rolls. And that's primarily related to the Ash Creek Station development project and the
Hoffman Meadows.
Yeah, Hoffman Meadows subdivision. So scenario A includes that development and a fairly conservative financial terms. So in his report, and Janet, I'm sure she's talked about this before, but there's the length of the term, 20 years, 30 years. There's coverage ratios that are required by some loans. So it could be a 1-to-1 ratio. It could be a 1.5-to-1 ratio. And the interest rate, of course, is, it can be anything from 2.5% to 5%. So when Nick was talking about the financial terms, that's specifically what he's talking about. So A included the $50 million forecasted development coming on the tax rolls that would be above the frozen base, so part of the increment. And conservative or more conservative financial terms. B and C did not include the $50 million in his forecast, and it included favorable financial terms, and one was more conservative financial terms. So, but based upon current information that we have, staff felt most comfortable with the scenario A, given the fact that Station is moving and Hoffman Estates is progressing, and you have the Monmouth Commons in the downtown business district is moving forward and things like that. So we feel comfortable, but like I said, you're going to want to review these forecasts every couple years anyway to ensure that the trend is going according to what we're using as our forecast. The big difference, and you'll see in his report, there was a lot of comparison between the original report and plan when it first came out, what the financial forecast was, and how it compares to what actually happened during that 2006 to 2019-20 period. And it was, of course, the development was really slow to occur at the beginning stages. And as a result of that, the income coming to the agency, the increment, the TIF, was lagged behind what was forecasted back in 2005 as part of the plan. Probably the biggest reason for that was the recession that happened in 2009 and 10. So building pretty much stopped, and there was a long period. But based upon what we're seeing right now, we're anticipating that there's an uptick, and according to Nick's forecast, over through 26 and then through 2031, we anticipate the assessed value and the increment to catch up with the original forecast. So light on the beginning, and then it becomes much more robust later on. And in my experience, that's been pretty common, where you'll see it to be slow the first 5 and 10 year increment as development and the investments in the district start to pick up, and then you'll see revenues coming in start to pick up over the last 10 years. So in this case, it's going to be really picking up steam over the last 5 years. So between 21 and 26, and then after 26, the agency will not be able to issue any additional debt. But based upon the forecast, we believe that if you use it's basically using all of your collections to retire existing debt. So it's 100% application of your income to retire debt. You'll be done in 31. Now that's not a requirement. You could under levy your increment and just pay off debt as it comes due instead of applying it in whole. And that can actually stretch out over quite a number of years. If you had, say, a 20-year loan that went from 2025 to 2045, the increment would be on the books coming on during that entire time. And that's where you under levy. We're advocating that you go ahead and apply the money. You apply all of the increment to retire your debt as soon as possible and be done with it. So, and Okay, and that's all I had to talk about with Tiberius's product, and I did pass that out to all of the agency directors. Are there any questions or comments regarding what Nick did with his memorandum? Okay, excellent. And if you do, just email me or call or something like that. It's like I said, it can be pretty dense sometimes. So Janet's going to pull up. We're going to put a couple things up on the screen. A few of them are just kind of places for you to see. I'm sure you have this at home, either in hard copy or on your screen that you can look at. The first one, so we're going to do a quick review of the revenue forecast. So this is a summary of the same work that Nick provided.
Can you see?
I can see it. Is there a way to
Make it bigger?
Yeah,
It's full size on my screen, but I can see it.
Well, it's probably just a way that I have my screen set up. So if you look at the resources that was sent out, there you go. So this is it shows the years, the total numbers. So fiscal year 20 we just completed, 21 through 26, and you'll see the line that divides after 26. So that's where the agency will no longer be able to incur debt. And I summarized the periods fiscal year 27 through 31, just so you can see what those last numbers are. But by and large, the agency will expire at the end of fiscal year 26. So that shows the increments coming in on an annual basis between 21 and 26. It's at that odd distance where I can't see it with or without my glasses. So again, this just shows what the agency is going to take in over the next number of years. And like I said, this is a summary of Nick's work. FY21 you see highlighted in green. That's the anticipated cash carryover from June 30th of this year. That's what we should start with. And then you'll see our collections during the year and the amount that we'll have available of cash on hand or resources available to apply to projects. And over the years, you just see the acceleration in the collections that will happen over the next 5 years. Down below, loan and bonds. So I identified two periods, FY21 and FY24, for when the agency should consider issuing debt. You won't have enough cash on hand coming in for a pay-as-you-go strategy, or at least strictly a pay-as-you-go strategy. You will have to incur debt to do that. So in 21, because of the magnitude of the water, sewer, and power and light projects, I identified that as a year to issue debt. And the city staff is scheduling a meeting with Piper Jaffray to talk about issuance and what instruments would be available to do. I know that there is some capacity internally to make loans from city reserves. So you could do that in a pinch as you need to do it, but certainly you wouldn't be able to do that as a sustainable practice. And I'm not a super big fan of using cash reserves for internal loans, not for the same reasons that were talked about during the other meeting, but I just, you end up tying up a lot of your reserves by loaning to other funds. And I'm just not a big fan of the practice per se, but there's nothing wrong with it either. Any questions on the resources? Okay.
I have a question regarding
Yes, sir.
And I just haven't done the arithmetic. but we've got a $450,000 ending fund balance on FY21, and then 1.8 million the following year. And I'm not sure how the resources get to that.
So Janet,
with the debt.
put that in if you want to answer the
Sure.
question.
Sure. So, Counselor Carey, it's because we're issuing the debt, and then with our uses, if you see the annual expenditures below, then you take your total resources of 800,000, you add in the bond of 3.2 million, that gets you to 4 million, and you subtract out the 2.172 million in annual expenditures, and that gets you to a beginning balance in 22 of 1.8. One of the reasons we're looking at a 3.2 million bond or loan is to carry us over those 2 or 3 years till the next debt issuance. Does that make sense?
Well, I just in that bottom column, I've got my microphone, my camera, my screen, and my lead sort of blocking.
Councilor Carey, let me just say, when we go through the project schedule, when you look at that, you'll understand the math, because the $2,090,000 that's scheduled for FY21 for capital projects will come out of that column, and so the carryover into the next year will be pretty much the leftover of the debt issuance. But you'll understand.
Okay.
You'll understand it when you see the schedule.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay. So what I asked Janet to do is to take us. I figured, having been with you guys for a little bit of time, there may be questions on the specific projects as we go through them. So instead of just putting up the summary for you to look at, this has with the descriptions, it includes the project title, the description, and a brief description of the basis of need. So I think the first couple times as you go through this, it's always good to, have some base level understanding of what the projects are. And I grouped them according to the type of infrastructure. So there's water, sewer, power and light. So and transportation. So they're grouped together like that. So this first page talks about water system projects that are eligible for urban renewal dollars. A lot of this is related to water supply. So I'll also point out that in urban renewal, if there's an infrastructure project that's inside the city, inside the district boundaries, it's eligible. If it's outside the district boundaries, it's eligible if it's providing a direct benefit to the agency. So some of these projects, and the second one, the water transmission line main, if you look at that one, for example, $1 million project, in fiscal year 25, there's $247,000 allocated for the project. That equals 24.7%, which is the ratio of district acreage to total city acreage. So, for example, without the transmission main or some of the water source projects, those provide a direct benefit to the agency and to the district area, but it's based on a prorated basis. So you'll see that on some of these projects as we're going through it. So with that, the first project is a Main Street water line project, and you can see the description. It's 810 lineal feet on Main Street between Knox and Monmouth Avenue, and that's a 12-inch line. And then the description of basis of need. I'm not sure that you guys want me to walk you through each and every project like that, but I guess the takeaway with the water category, so you have the Main Street water line, water transmission, the Willamette Wellfield, Marion County well number 3, the system intertie with Independence and the Gwynn Street distribution trunk line. The total of those water projects to the district is $744,393. And then you can see the breakdown per year. So that's what the, at least at this point, based upon discussions with the Public Works Director and myself going through it, that's what the agency would contribute to water projects. Some of them are at 100%, like the Main Street Waterline project, the first one. Some are at ratios, the 24.7%. And there's a few projects that are also partly in the district and partly out. So, for example, maybe it's on the next page, but some of the projects are, say, 60% within the district. So it's a 60% application of revenue or investment. And 40% is based at a 24.7% prorated contribution. Any questions on any of the water projects?
Oh, I'll just bring up the math problem on what's page 007.
Well, it's not a problem.
Okay, I would like to bring up the discrepancy where the amounts listed on the summary page do not match the amounts listed on the detailed description, project description basis of needs page. So for example, on the intertie project for fiscal year 21, it shows a contribution of $24,700, and the back part on page 009 is $12,350 in fiscal year 20.
Which page is that?
The intertie one?
Yeah, no, I see where the 12,350 is.
I think she's talking about the summary
The
page.
summary page?
Right, page 007. It shows that same contribution at 24,700.
Well, the
So we're gonna,
intertie is one in
we're gonna
particular.
nickname her Eagle Eye. That's correct. So that's an error on
I
the
just
summary.
beat John to it.
That is an error on the front page. And the reason for the error is at the beginning, the total project is $100,000. It's a jointly shared 50-50 split between the two cities. So our share was $50,000. The 24,700 is based upon the $100,000.
Ah.
The correct number should have been 24.7% of $50,000, which I got correct on the one page and not the other.
The detail page is correct and the summary page is overstated. Thank you.
Correct. Okay. Well, thank you. Actually, we'll have to make sure we correct that. But the number on the detail with the description, that's the number that's correct. It's $12,350. Okay. Any other questions or comments about the water? I'll give you an editorial comment, which is, and I'm sure Russ will agree with me, I wish we had to use some of this money on the highway project. And we can't go back. I already tried.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thanks for trying.
Okay, the next one is regarding the sanitary sewer system. So there's only two projects there. The first one is a Warren Street sewer extension and the Southwest Pump Station interceptor. The first one is a $200,000 project. The next one is $950,000. The interceptor is 40% in the district, so 40% of the 950 is the contribution, and then the 60% at the 24.7%. So, you know, again, if you're trying to understand why there's prorated numbers, it's just because there's different levels that the agency can participate based upon the Oregon statutes. Now you'll see both of those projects are in the first year, FY21. So this is part of the reason we will have to look at some type of debt instrument. The next category is for the park system. So we looked at 3 different projects. And the first 2 is the Northeast. And so, and again, the city just adopted its park master plan. There's still a little work to be done as far as updating the parks SDC methodology report. But the Northeast Regional Park is in the area of the district, and the Ash Creek Trail also would be at least partly in the district. Now, both of those projects are big projects. And at this time, they haven't been vetted sufficiently for me to be able to give you good, hard numbers. So when I was preparing this, what I did was I included $300,000 for each of those projects as placeholder numbers, what the agency could contribute towards a future development project for those. I'm not saying that the timing may not work out. You may not be able to pursue it, but both of those are projects that the city is, I think, is very interested in looking at. They just haven't been vetted enough, and there hasn't been enough pre-development work. And some of this may be funding to do some pre-development work to work on those projects. The third one that is labeled MRP improvements. So the MRP park improvements. So that's specifically related to the skate park project. Now, and I'll circle back to this at the end of our discussion, but the skate park is not inside the urban renewal district. It would require a minor amendment to bring it in. It's adjacent to the district boundaries, so it would be a simple adjustment to bring that in. And a minor amendment basically just requires an action, if I remember right, an action by the agency and notice out to the taxing districts, the other agencies that are inside the district, to let them know that you're doing a minor amendment. That one, again, that is up to the agency to decide if they want to do a minor amendment and bring that in. I will tell you that skate parks, because it's a general fund activity, traditionally are pretty difficult to fund through the general fund. So this was a method to be able to take off about 1/3 of the anticipated cost for the project. You would probably look at park SDCs for another chunk of it, and then prepare an application to the Oregon Parks and Rec Board through their local government program for the balance. But again, that's not set in stone. That agency would have to take action to do that. Okay, the next item is the transportation system. So the first one is Highway 51 pedestrian improvements. So that would be to, that one actually would be a very good project to construct pedestrian improvements on the east side of Highway 99. Hoffman Road, again, so this Hoffman Road project is a project that Public Works and the city has a lot of interest in, but it's a complicated project. It requires multiple partners and stakeholders to work on it, including the county.
Independent.
Yeah, independent. So, and it's a large number, $2.6 million. So, looking at the outer years, when I talked to Russ, it's not a project that the city would be able to take on in the short term. So, those $200,000 contributions in FY24 and 25, the idea would be to begin some pre-development work, some studies, if you have to do some wetland studies, whatever you needed to do. So that would be more related to the city's due diligence with the project. Now, the agency could increase the contributions, but I just don't know that you're going to be able to do any substantive work on that project within the time period that we're talking about, you know, so I just, but, you know, things could change. So it's on the list though. Highway 99 bike ped corridor study. So that's $45,000 in FY21. Rectangular rapid flashing beacon, $140,000. So we included $50,000 in FY23 as a match to an ODOT grant application, so that, and that's better than 30%. And at least at this point, I thought that was a good contribution level to make a grant application to ODOT for those flashing beacons. The last one in transportation, the downtown corridor sidewalk repairs. So that includes $500,000 aggregate, $100,000 per year to go to streetscape improvements, specifically sidewalks, but it could include any type of streetscape component anywhere in the district, including side streets. So it's not just on Main Street. It could go off on any of the side streets, on Clay Street, and I can't remember what the name of the next block over is. What's the next block over?
Which way are you going?
North.
On the other side of the park.
Jackson.
Jackson. Yeah, so the boundary is Clay and Jackson. So we're anticipating, you know, some substantial investments in your pedestrian facilities within the district area. Any questions on transportation? Power and light. So this first grouping are overhead to underground conversions. Church Street, Jackson Street, Warren to Powell, Warren Street to Broad Street, and you can see the contributions and the timing for those. And then the last item for power and light is a switch installation at Knox Avenue at Powell Street. Again, that's not inside the district, so that's why you see a reduced contribution at 24.7% of the total project cost. Any questions on power and light? So let's see, the next grouping is for some line extensions. Most of these are relatively smaller projects, but you can see Ash Creek Station is the largest one with the agency contributing $108,000 towards that project in total. And then the undergrounding, so there were some temporary secondary services that are still above ground, and this would provide assistance to get those underground on the highway. No, and I didn't tally up, but it's on your sheet. So for power and light, the total contribution of the agency over the 5 years is $669,000. And just a reminder, so this schedule shows 21 through 25, 5 years. The agency goes until 26. I put a footnote in somewhere that I'm leaving that last year, 26, as a kind of a residual year for carryover projects. If there's some difficulty completing projects that you don't feel yourself completely bunched up at the end. So any of these can be shifted around, but I left the final year 26 as a open period to work within. Okay, let's see, almost done. So there's a category that I included as community development facilities, and those include, so the first one is the staff person for community development. So we included that this year in FY21 at $45,000, and with the intent to have that position on through FY22. I just went ahead and ran it out through the 5 years. That doesn't commit the agency to doing it, but it's just like we talked about during the budget meetings, if the agency is going to complete the plan to the greatest extent possible, you're going to need some assistance internally, and this is one method to do that. The next one is downtown redevelopment projects. So these are projects that can assist with renovation, redevelopment of properties. There's a footnote about leveraging Oregon Main Street grant programs and things like that. I've seen those projects work. So that's just, it's a pool of funds that are available for assisting with downtown renovation. The Gateway Arch project. So this is identified specifically in the urban renewal plan. I tend to think of it more, not specifically as an arch per se. It could be that, but think of it as some type of entrance feature, into the community. So it could be, when I was in Rainier, the agency contributed to a large entrance feature that included a 15-foot obelisk and pretty elaborate signage and gardens and a rock wall and things like that. The idea is that you're trying to create a feature that will draw people into your downtown business district. Economic development assistance or loan funds. So that could be, the most recent experience you've had with that was the SDC contribution to the Ash Creek Station. It could be for that type of assistance. It could be for low or no interest loans, different things like that, helping to relocate businesses. You'll see that number is a little bigger, anticipating that, especially if you pursue relocating or assisting some businesses to relocate to alternative sites, that might take up a little bit more money than you would think. So that one's a little bit higher. Downtown lighting and displays, the City Hall project, and the urban renewal plans and studies. So that's for like engineering, and it could be a lot of different things. I'll circle back to the City Hall project. So in this case, we've identified $2.25 million. So during the budget, we talked about $1.75 million that the agency would contribute. That was a placeholder number. I've gone through this. I penciled in $2.25 million. You could increase it or decrease it. It's a project. It's going to be a big project. I think it will probably require, certainly it'll require urban renewal participation. It's just always a discussion about how much. Now, after that being said, it's a community facilities project, so similar to the skate park, you would have to provide notice to, I believe it's your 4 largest taxing districts that are inside the urban renewal area. You have to provide notice to them that you're going to contribute some dollars to public facilities, and that was a fairly recent change in the law. So the City Hall project, you would do that. And part of the reason the number has gone up and may move up more is because of the reluctance that I'm assuming some of the City Council will have with regarding a general obligation bond for the City Hall project. City Hall projects are always tough projects to convince the community, and especially in light of COVID-19 and some of the impact that has had. I want to be sensitive to that. So you may want to increase the contribution from the agency to minimize how much money you would have to go out for a bond. And one other thing that didn't make the list, it came to me afterwards, is there's 2 capital projects in the police department that are languishing. It's their covered parking for their vehicles and their storage facility. Both of those were included in the capital improvement plan as part of the budget. The police department is in the district boundaries and would be eligible for the agency to make a contribution to those projects. The thumbnail number for those is 220, well, let's say $225,000. I think that would be again, general fund projects are always difficult because of competing activities in the general fund. And so this would be a way to minimize the impact of the police department improvements. So I would advocate to include that. I would have included it on the list had I thought of it before I went to, I wake up thinking about things sometimes. So that's it on the projects. I do want to say that I tried to focus as much as I could on infrastructure projects, water, sewer, transportation, power, and light. Unfortunately, I was disappointed to not be able to capture as many projects as I would have liked to just in those areas. And that's not anybody's fault, and we'll still circle back and look for projects that we can pull into at least water and sewer. And the reason for that is both of those, and power and light, all of those are rate-funded enterprises. And anything that the Urban Renewal Agency is able to contribute to their capital improvement programs will have a reduction, will reduce the impact on future rate increases. So when developing the list, I'm always keeping an eye on what infrastructure projects can we bring in to reduce the impact on future rates.
So, first of all, as someone on the Urban Renewal Agency Review Board that's worried about all of this stuff back in 2010, and said, gee, what we really need to know is we need to know how much debt we can take on and what's a good plan for that, and let's get started on that. And that was not the will of the city at the time to do that. So this is, again, as Chad said, it would have been nice if we'd eased into this, but this is exactly the kind of thing the Urban Renewal Agency was implemented for. I'm not sure what kind of steps you really need us to take tonight.
So I'm glad you asked that.
And then we'll have questions.
I have a couple notes here for that. So there's a couple things just in general, and again, you're looking at it for the first time. We can come back at a later meeting for you to officially approve it, but I am looking for some type of consensus on the overall format, the presentation, the way it's put together, just generally speaking. That's the first thing. So because I need to know that I'm walking down the correct path before I get too far. The second thing is I need to know specifically if there's agreement on FY21 projects. So if you look at that column, we're in, and there's a fair amount of, that's a pretty big year, 2 million plus the first year. So as far as those projects, if the agency is agreeable specifically to FY21, we can then begin working on that and start to insert some of the financing into those projects so that as any of the directors and the finance director are working on their financing schedule, they know that the agency supports those projects in particular. And then the third thing is so again, a consensus, and it doesn't, if you say, well, I need to think about it, that's fine too. But there's 3 public projects that are there that if the council, or I'm sorry, the agency supports those, I need to know that so I can start working on notification. We'll have to bring in Elaine Howard to work with us. So that would be the City Hall project, the skate park project, and the Monmouth Police Department project. There's additional work that has to be done with those to provide notice to the other agencies, and one of them requires a minor amendment to the district to bring the skate park in. So I would have to get together with Elaine and have her prepare a minor amendment to do that. So those are the three things. Overall, specific year FY21, and then just about the public projects.
Okay, thank you. Just so, first of all, does anyone have over general questions again about how this works, or what the need is, or why we are moving forward in general to take on debt, which again doesn't seem like a great thing, except that's exactly what this was designed for. It is paid off by the additional tax increment that comes when you make improvements to property and systems within the district. So that is how it's done. I will also say you didn't ask about really that guidance on moving forward with the bond sale, with potentially in creating debt, selling bonds, but you can't get a better bond market. I mean, it's pretty darn good right now. And it seems like if we are going to do that, that is something I would also be interested in hearing folks say. So, and then specific projects, I know we would all have different priorities potentially, maybe move things up or back. And I'm not sure we want to get into that tonight. We can do that after folks have a chance to look in more depth, but in general, comments or questions? Byron.
I have a sort of two-part question, and whoever can answer it. What is the mechanism for the agency acquiring debt, and how would that work, and just from a technical or a mechanical aspect? And then secondly, in that report, it's talking about the max accrued of $12 million. Is that you can accrue $12 million over the life of this thing, or is this you can only have a maximum of $12 million at any one time?
Now, over the life of, so I'll take the second one first. That's the easier one. Over the life of the plan, which is 2006 to 26, you're capped at maximum indebtedness of $12 million. So there were, if you remember, there's two hard, fast rules that you have. One is you can't exceed $12 million total in debt issuance. The second one is you sunset in at the end of fiscal year 26. Those are the two hard and fast rules that you have. So currently the city has incurred approximately $3.5 to $3.6 million of that maximum indebtedness, that 12 million. So you have approximately $8.5 million of available MI capacity of the $12 million. So it's over the entire term. You can't issue more than $12 million in aggregate. As far as the issuance, so even I've been in this is my third agency. And in the past, they haven't actually issued out. The issuance has been, say, for example, on big water projects, they go to Oregon Business, to the IFA, the city secures a loan for X number of dollars, and the agency enters into an IGA with the city that obligates them to pay back the debt schedule according to the debt schedule. So in Rainier, for example, that's what they did. The answer to and I'll turn it over to Janet, but part of the answer to the question is why we're scheduling a meeting with Piper Jaffray to talk to them about issuance.
Yeah, so I have not actually issued debt for Urban Renewal District to date. I've issued a lot of other debt, and so we will rely on Piper Jaffray, but I have seen use of the Oregon Bond Bank before for that purpose. And I'm anticipating that we will issue something that is backstopped by these tax increment monies that we can project fairly stably into the future. So it is not something that, like a general obligation bond where we're going to be asking for more money from taxpayers.
It's basically full faith and credit.
Yeah,
Correct.
correct.
So end of the term, are we expected to have a zero balance debt at the end of the life of when this thing sunsets? Are we expected to not have any debt in this agency, or how does that?
I'll do that, Janet. So no, in 2026, you're not expected to have all of your debt retired. 2026 just is that's the time that you cannot issue any additional debt. So that's where it stops. If you, let's say, for example, the agency said, we don't want to issue any debt. We're just on a pay-as-you-go basis. That's all we're going to do. If you look at the resource column, the agency is going to leave somewhere between $4 and $5 million on the table because that is debt capacity you could have incurred, but you decided not to for some reason. Now I'm not advocating you do that, but no, you can carry debt past 2026 and then pay it off. So according to this plan, you would have two debt issuances in 21 and 24. And you would, at 26, you would stop incurring any new debt. Now, any debt proceeds that you were still holding, you would be eligible to spend on projects, so you could continue to spend. You just couldn't issue new debt. And according to Tiberius's forecast, you would pay off the balance of the debt, assuming that you took all of the debt you could. You would pay it off in fiscal year 31. So 5 years after the basically the end of the Urban Renewal District, which is actually really pretty good.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, a lot of
That's incredible.
a lot of agencies, they don't they continue
They don't
because
sunset.
they don't sunset, but they also have debt that's issued out over 20 years, so
Yeah.
they may continue to pay debt through 2040, for example. So I really like the way these numbers came up.
So then after the sunset, does the increment revert back to the general, or how does that work?
So after the sunset, the increment would continue to be collected to pay the debt until the debt was all paid off. So in this case, the increment would be released to the taxing districts in 32. So the year after that, 31. So that would be the year that the agency makes the final payment on outstanding debt. And then in fiscal year 32, the increment is released to the taxing districts.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Other sort of general questions about the process or comments on Mr. Carey?
One of the things that I tried to match up as I was looking through this list of projects, what's the purpose? What are we trying to accomplish with this? I did find a bit. Oh, and by the way, just one correction, Chad. Under the power and light, it talks about some of the undergrounding. Church Street to north of Ash Creek. Church Street runs east and west, so I'm not sure how that would work. So you might want to look at the language on that. I was confused by it.
From Church
It's under
Street.
power line. But I was trying to figure out I like the idea of all of it. I'm just trying to figure out what we're trying to accomplish what the goals of the thing are, and I sort of looked in the overview provided by Tiberius, and it talks about facade improvement program, infrastructure improvements, code compliance, structural retrofit program, and site-specific redevelopment projects. Intended to deal with a blighted area. I'm trying to see, I'm just trying to figure out what we're trying to get out of it other than, just sort of upgrade the city's infrastructure. And maybe that's it. And if that's it, then that's okay.
Yeah.
But I guess I was looking for, like land acquisition. And I'd like to buy some stuff downtown so we could, turn over to somebody. I'd like to buy that Oddfellows building rather than try to work a lease thing.
They don't want to sell it. I already asked them.
Just for example. And I'm not sure of that. I'm not,
Well,
I don't know.
Yeah. So
But as an example, we've got those little residences. They're just east of Domino's. Maybe we buy those up and we've got something that we can. Maybe we buy that relic around the corner behind the bank that needs to be mowed again. By the way, a little wraparound development there over onto Jackson. I don't know. But all I see is underground stuff.
Yeah. So a couple answers. One is back in 2005 when the city council was looking, they developed the two things: the urban renewal plan and the report of the plan. And we'll make sure to send out copies of those. I presume that everyone has a copy of that, but we'll resend those out so you can see. It will list out the goals and objectives of the agency in that. That being said, so just the general, and everything you mentioned is eligible. So when you look at the plan, it identifies categories of eligible projects. And they're not listed so specifically that you can't use some broad discretion on these, but they talk about the project categories you can do, and it can be acquisition of property. You can do that according to your plan. It can be making loans, working with businesses, infrastructure, and different things like that. The original intent of urban renewal is to make investments in designated areas to eliminate blight. In Oregon, the definition of blight is fairly easy to meet, but that's what the plan and the report did back in 2005. They went through, I think it was Jeff Tashman that worked on that. So I had known Jeff for years before he retired, and Elaine took over his accounts. But that's what, the short answer is that it's intended to remove blight or blight-like conditions in designated areas, and areas to remove obstacles to investment, to private development, and those type of things. So why do you see a lot, in my opinion, why do you see a lot of money invested in underground stuff, things you can't see? Because those are typically the barriers to private investment. So if a private project wants to come in and do something, well, they get held up because they have to replace 100 or 500 lineal feet of water line to upsize from 12 to 14 or 16 inches. Put in new sewer lines, maybe do some significant code compliance issues with sidewalks and things like that. So it's a means of addressing and providing improved conditions for private investment within the district. But I'll send that out, the plan and the report. You can kind of look through it and see what the goals are. in my mind, the best use of the money is for infrastructure projects, and then that's first. And that was my first concentration, was on infrastructure: water, sewer, streets, sidewalks, power and light. And then after that, you look at some of the other types of improvements that are maybe a little bit more cosmetic, with the streetscape type projects, for example, in parks. Byron.
What would be helpful for me is, and I know we talked about lots of these things, is to get and I don't know how we do it, maybe some sort of a ranking, but a list of the priority of these projects, and then the level of, what sense of urgency is there to get this done in this particular year, if that makes sense.
So if you look at either the summary table or the table that has descriptions on them, there's a priority column that you can look at as it relates to. So, for example, in the water projects, you can see the ones that are ranked 1 or 2. Typically, if they're 1, you're looking at earlier. If it's 2, it might be a little bit later, but that can be dependent on different conditions that influence when the timing of a project, for example. But for most of these, they included a priority identification. And really the only comment that I'll put is under the community development facilities category, all of those are rated as number 1 because all of those are listed specifically in the urban renewal plan. Now, the timing of them can always change according to the agency's priorities, but those, as you can see, they are projects that carry over across the remaining term of the plan. And so I assigned a 1 priority ranking to each of those simply because they're clearly identified in the plan as projects, UR projects.
And again, typically, if an agency could have a review board, typically we could have an advisory board. In the past, it was the same as the Economic Development Commission. That could be the same. Perhaps we can have our Economic Development Task Force, when we get them together, if we decide to constitute them as an ongoing body, this might be something we turn over to them to really dig through and prioritize and make recommendations onto us. That's something they can do well, typically. No,
I like
yes, they were great. We were great.
Well, I'm not saying that they're not great. The problem is with that is, so I've worked with those groups in the past for urban renewal projects, and let me tell you, there can be a whole bunch of personal agendas that come into the picture, and they're not accountable for $8.5 million. The agency board of directors is. And it certainly
that stays us.
Well, it's you're accountable for how it's to be spent. And the other thing is you're at the final 5 years. There definitely is a sense of urgency to do this because, in my mind, this is funds that you are collecting to make investments into the district, and if that gets, again, I'm thinking expediting this as quickly as possible. I want to hear the feedback, and I'm going to immediately turn around and make any modifications or adjustments that the agency wants me to do. But quite honestly, for this work, and it depends on how the advisory committee would be structured as far as the input into it. But I would be a little nervous about that myself. Let's just say I had a really bad experience with a citizen advisory committee who basically dictated what projects were going and when they were going.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
Other general questions, general guidance or directions, so we've just got another item to get to tonight, and it's 9 o'clock. So
Byron, I just want to circle back. Do you feel like your question was answered as far as the priorities?
Yeah, I think it was, as far as the priorities. I'm still not sure. I need more discussion as far as, if we don't do it this year, B is going, or A or B will be the consequences. We'll have a giant sinkhole in the middle of, Main Street or something to that effect to demonstrate the level of urgency.
Well,
Not just is a priority for me, because there's a lot of ones up there, and not everything can be a one, and there can only be one number one. And so just trying to really parse down what things, given our current and maybe future financial climate, what are the things that really, really, really need to be addressed.
So and we can do that, but the only comment back is, just remember, you're looking at a 5-year plan with a sunset, and so everything is almost high priority. And a lot of these projects are they're not being driven by something's going to break tomorrow. It's being driven by a 20-year perspective of investment into the district boundaries. So
No, I get that. It's just, we got to spend it now is not a very good reason to go out and incur more debt. And that's just the view from my seat. It needs to be well thought out, as if this wasn't going to sunset it in my mind. I'm just kind of thinking out loud here, but I'd hate to enter into bad deals because I was rushed into something, if that makes sense.
So bad deals as it relates to borrowing, or bad deals as it relates to projects?
Mostly borrowing.
Okay. Thank you.
And I think if you go back, you had a presentation from Scott on the district and sort of the history and the plan. And if you go back and look at that, I think that also gives us a little bit of a sense that a lot of this stuff has been thought out and vetted before. It just hasn't been acted on.
Exactly.
John has his hand up.
Yes, John. And then,
Real quick, one of the things that I'm a little, I've got less heartburn about taking on debt in this context, in that unless we really go wild with what we do, we've got a stable revenue source to pay that debt off. It's not like the bottom's going to drop out of the property taxes. Well, I guess that's not the best example, but in some cases, you're gambling on a big increase in dollars. This is a pretty stable revenue stream to pay for. However, one of my concerns about all this is our capacity to do it. A lot of it would be, contracted out, obviously, but still, there's a lot of management that is required on, power and light and all the physical, or the power public works people. A lot of work in there, a lot of money and a lot of work. But it's good. It's great if we can do it, but we got to be aware of that too.
yep, good point. Chris, did you have something?
Yeah, and I just want to make sure that I've got this right, because I feel like things have perhaps gotten a little confused, at least in my head. My understanding is that this is incurring debt, but this is leveraging money that we wouldn't otherwise have directly, because those debts are those funds are coming from other tax distribution sources. Maybe that's not the right terminology, but the impetus to spend these funds quickly is not so much that these projects are, as I think John covered, burning needs, but that the spending of the funds is burning needs, because if we don't spend them, they go back to wherever they were going to go originally, and that's not us. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so yeah, I'm good with this, and I'm good with the entire list.
Yeah, so if you look at Tiberius's analysis, there's a sheet there that shows the tax increment, each of the funding agencies that participate. So that would be the city, the county, the fire district, and so on.
District.
School district, but you get money in the back. So each of the tax districts, there's a table there that shows each of those and the increment that goes to the district. So to your point, Chris, yes, if it's money that is not, it's money that's being provided to the city from other agencies to invest in the infrastructure based upon the theory that removing obstacles, higher investment in the district area, that in the long run, they're going to get a return on their investment that they've done. But it's not, so if you look at the resource table, part of that is city money, but certainly not, we're only one of 8 taxing districts or whatever the number is.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, Darren, I've seen a lot of nodding. You were here for the creation of this thing, so I know you.
Yeah, and like I think you said earlier, one of the things we needed was this many years ago, or a number of years back anyhow. And I just have reviewed, since Chad had said it earlier, I kind of went back and re-reviewed 2021 and 22, and I am good with all those projects for those first 2 years. So at least from my perspective, I would say keep moving forward. And you know, numbers will probably change because again, they're all estimates at this point, but I think they're good projects. They seem to be the things that would put us infrastructure wise and otherwise in pretty good shape to support within the area the appropriate development that we hope continues to happen. So I'm good. And yeah, you're right, from being involved way back with it. It's too bad we wouldn't have had this earlier, and then we wouldn't be at 5 years trying to push it all quickly out now, but all looks good to me.
Thanks. All right, unless there's any other comments, do you have what you need from us?
So
The format looks good. I think that was understandable.
Format looks good. Is there any heartburn with us working to include the skate park, bringing it into the district? No heartburn with that I hear. And again, I can't go out and do this myself. It comes back to the agency. So I can't change the boundaries. I can just work on the preparation to get it up to the agency. And then no heartburn on the City Hall skate park or the police department. Again, it requires some pre-development work to do, but and there will be refinement, and you know, obviously there's going to be reoccurring meetings with the agency as we work through this. So I wouldn't, you know, Byron, we'll circle back and try to address some of your concerns, specifically as it relates to the lending, but the projects themselves. What I can do is bring the directors back in and walk you through specifically each of the projects. So during work sessions, well, I mean, what I'm used to when I do the.
Can I just, I'm sorry to, but with Chris, the answer to Chris's question, his skillfully asked question, it really sort of crystallized things in my mind and brought some clarity to what was foggy for me. So I'm actually good with this now. Thank you, though.
Okay, well, thank you. So, and just to finish, each of these, as we're moving through, there's going to be constant coming back to the city council or the agency, because I'm used to working with a lot of, you know, pretty much collaborative work with the council. So you're not going to not hear from anybody for the next 12 months either.
So I think my only comment about that, it's a little harder to envision not that I wouldn't rather just get it done and spend the money here instead of out of the general fund, but to envision the improvements to the police department as a benefit to the agency. All this other stuff I totally get. I'm that would be one where I'd have a little bit harder time making the connection, even though it's sort of minimal dollars.
So the short answer to that is there's a reason why agencies have to go back and tell the other taxing districts that they're using money on public facilities.
Right.
And it's because agencies had used so much money to build new police buildings and city halls. It caused so much heartburn that there was an amendment to the statute. So, but that being said, it's, the benefit is to the agency and the district by having a good, well-functioning PD is, if you're going to say, the same would be about the parks.
No, parks are amenities that increase investment in our community.
I agree.
Covering up police cars is harder to sell.
I don't.
Doesn't mean it's not a good thing.
I can agree with that.
All right.
Just quickly, if while you're working on the skate park, would it be possible to include that recreation park there, the baseball or the softball field or ball field, tennis court, dog park into that? Remember, we've been trying to get that daggum tennis court, pickleball court going. Is that too big a leap? I mean, it's kind of contiguous. Anyway, take a look. It would be nice if we could.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, John, for that suggestion.
Good suggestion. All right. I am going to ask for a motion to adjourn the Urban Renewal Agency meeting.
Move to adjourn.
And all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Anybody want to keep going on this? No. Okay. We are adjourned.